Assalamualaikum and a very good morning, everyone. So today we are back with our Meta Journal Hour. So this is our series 23. Our title today is an evidence-based demand management strategy using a hub and spoke training model reduces waiting time for children's therapy services and implementation trial. So this is the article that we are going to appraise today. This article is published in Wiley by a team of researchers from Australia. So if you haven't got the chance to read the paper, you can actually scan the QR code on the screen to actually get the paper. Okay. I think someone is coming. Let me admit first. Okay. All right. So, as for the introduction, approximately around 7% of children in Australia and 1 in 10 children worldwide live with a disability, which comprises of cognitive and also physical disability, and this emphasizes the need for timely access to services during crucial periods of growth and development. So, one of the initiatives that is important to address this issue is actually short waiting times, in which short waiting times from referral to first appointment are also among one of the factors that is most highly valued by family in the delivery of these services to ensure that their children can get this timely access to the healthcare services. So, what does it mean by waiting times? So, long waiting times is usually defined as the time from the referral to first appointment or waiting list, which is the number of people waiting for a first appointment at any given time. So usually there would be imbalance in terms of long waiting times because there would be excessive demands and also limited resources, which will cause long waiting times or waiting lists for the patients coming to the healthcare centers. So many strategies that have been implemented worldwide to actually reduce or improve the waiting times. So some of the strategies includes to allocate new referrals directly to protected initial appointments, or combining triage and initial assessment at the point of service, or service redesigning approach in which to eliminate the process that do not add value to the client care. And there is one model that actually combine all these approaches, which is called specific timely appointment for triage, which is also known as the STAT model. So in this STAT model, all eligible clients are seen by a clinician from the service soon after the referral, regardless of the reason for referral or perceived priority. So everyone would get the chance to be seen by a clinician, and prioritization decision on the ongoing clinical resources are then made by the treating clinicians following a face-to-face assessment of the client's need. So this process actually allows the needs of incoming clients to be prioritized against those already receiving services. However, studies that have addressed or that have investigated on this module actually um, only included adult population conducted in a controlled clinical trial. And the findings of those trials actually have found that there were actually reduction in waiting time, which is around 30 to 40%. So this study is going to determine whether training healthcare clinicians and managers on the STAT model in pediatric community health services would lead to a reduced waiting time for children seeking allied health therapy. And for the secondary objective is to evaluate whether implementing STAT model was associated with changes in the employee satisfaction, and to determine whether there were impacts on other measures of service delivery, and to explore the employee perceptions of implementing the STAT model in their healthcare centers. In terms of the method of the study, so this study is a non-randomized intervention study in which the service data was routinely collected for children referred to 5 community health clinics or centers in Melbourne, Australia, before, during, or after the implementation of the STAT model. On top of that, employee surveys were also collected during and after the implementation of the STAT model, and this study was reviewed and approved by the Eastern Health Human Research Ethics Committee and was reported in accordance with the strengthening the reporting observational studies in epidemiology, which is the stroke checklist. So although this is the intervention study, they actually reported this study according to the stroke, which is for the observational studies checklist.
So Iman, this is an interventional study,
Yes, interventional study, but it's non-randomized because it's
non-randomized.
yes because
So
it's
is it something like a standard kind of design for implementation trial?
I think yes, we can see the timeline later. But I think yes,
Mm.
it's a standard implementation trial.
Yeah, as I also read the article, it seems like implementation trial is not too complex, you know, it's kind
Yeah.
of quite easy
Mm,
to do.
mm,
Yeah, but I think the key is that you must have already a proven intervention
mm.
before you
Right.
can do an implementation trial to check the effect of the intervention. So I
Yes.
think the key is to have a proven intervention before
Yeah.
having or before going into implementation trial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the STAT model itself is actually from evidence based. So there will
Mm.
be 5 steps that we will review later on. So it's actually evidence based. So it's actually a proven intervention to be
Yeah.
implemented. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
So in terms of the flow of the study, so in this study, each participating centers will provide a common data set containing routinely collected data from electronic health records for all children referred to the relevant allied health disciplines from 1st of January 2019 to the 31st August of 2021. So there would be three groups of time points, follow-up, which is follow-up time points, in which that first is grouped as the pre-intervention group for children referred from 1st January 2019 to 31st August 2019. And then the second group is the implementation group, in which children referred from 1st January 2020 to 31st August 2020. And the third group is the post-intervention group, which involve children referred from 1st January 2021 to 31st August 2021. So children who had not received an appointment by 1st December of the corresponding year were excluded from each cohort to ensure that each of the children recruited in the study have a consistent period of follow-up within each group, and each data collection period also encompass of the same 9 month of each calendar year to ensure that seasonal variation in referral patterns would not be a confounder in the data.
Iman, would you be able to explain a bit more on these 2 points?
Oh, okay. So from what I understand, Prof, for example, those subjects that is going to be referred from this one particular calendar, if they are not being referred by the December, maksudnya dia tak akan masuk on the next group.
Not receive an appointment by 1st December,
December or the corresponding year.
excluded from each cohort. Hmm. Why
Right?
is that so? Because of winter, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Seasonal variation.
It's a variation. Because they want to make sure that by this 1st January, everyone would be included so that they would get the same 9 months of the period of the follow-up, from what I
Hmm.
understand. Lah. But this one is also not elaborated much in the paper in terms of this appointment. Yeah.
January to August is 8 months only. What?
Hmm. Kira one, I think they considered one whole month's code. But yeah.
1 whole month. But
Hmm.
whichever I think is that the is consistent is actually the comparison is the same lah.
Hmm.
It's just that I just
Yeah.
wonder why is it so important that they exclude children who have not received an appointment by 1st
By 1st December.
December. Appointment here is s-
It's the
seeing the referee, seeing the person that the children were referred to, isn't it? So if they have not got an appointment to see the healthcare professional that they were actually referred to see
hmm.
by 1st of December of that year, you'll be excluded from
Hmm.
each cohort.
Hmm.
So here we have three, I mean the period, pre, during, and after intervention.
Yeah.
So there's an issue about seasonal variation, I suppose. That's why they do this, which we don't understand, isn't it?
Hmm. Yes. But I think it's in Australia lah, Prof. So I don't think that their December is winter, right?
Uh, almost lah, not yet
Hmm.
lah.
Hmm. Hmm.
December, January, and February, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, keep this in mind. I mean, the one good thing is that it's the same for the
For
whole
each.
trip period lah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just that whether it has any impact on the result or not.
Mm.
Meaning to say, if the 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 findings, when you want to apply the findings, so it may not be applied when come to the end of the year, that kind of thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Eh, we can't tell if the December performance of this so-called waiting list will be as good as what is reported.
Mm.
So must be something wrong with that December month. Is it a lot of people go on leave or what?
Mm.
May
Mm.
I may I add?
Yeah. Sure. Hi, Darina.
Hi, Prof. Chu. I studied in that area when I was doing my undergraduate. I was in New
Okay.
Zealand, and December is peak of summer.
Ah, oh, you're
And
right. Australia.
uh,
And do they go on leave also?
they
Summer
summer
leave.
they all cuti gila-gila like that, and then they maybe, and then also during that time they have hay fever, they have all sorts of,
Hay fever.
maybe the incidence of illness a bit high during that time, so they just maybe haywire jugalah, and then mungkin mereka keluar dari kawasan, like so they go
Ah,
travelling, so maybe like us lah, KL pergi Terengganu like that, so maybe the
okay.
uh, haywire sikit lah, I think
Oh, yeah, lah. So that
the ni, so
once,
dia nak
okay,
maybe they want to take a in a, dia nak
more typical kind of months lah.
months yang stable kind of thing, in a
Mm.
stable scenario,
Okay,
can they apply this model or not, and then
sure.
the one yang haywire tu, maybe they do another model.
Okay, thank you. And forgot this is Southern Hemisphere.
Mm.
This summer. All right, thank you.
Alright, so in terms of the employee survey, so those are managers, clinician, and administrative staff were actually completed online survey pre and post implementation, which is 6 months after the implementation of the model. So any employee impacted by the change in service delivery was eligible to participate, and the survey was completed anonymously, and consent was implied through the submission of the online questionnaire. In terms of the setting, so there were five participating healthcare centers involved. There were actually six were invited, but only five agreed to participate in the implementation of the STAT model. And this includes live healthcare services related to physical or cognitive disabilities, disorders of speech or language, developmental delays or concerns related to feeding or nutrition. And majority of the children receiving services in those healthcare services were of preschool age, but referrals were also accepted for infants and school age children in the same setting. And in terms of the socio-demographic background of the children in those centers, majority of the children attending the centers was born in Australia, while the 23% in Asia, 7% in Europe, and the remaining were from Africa, and the remainder from other parts of the world. In terms of the intervention model, so the STAT model, which is also known as the specific timely appointments triage. So this is a principle-based models of access and triage that brings together several evidence-based strategies to improve patient flow into a step-by-step process that can be implemented methodologically by health service providers. So this model begins with a targeted short-term intervention tailored to the individual service to reduce the existing backlog of waiting patients. So, how was this intervention being implemented in this study? So, first, clinician will schedule a specified number of assessment appointments every week based on the historical data that they have, with the aim of having sufficient appointments to meet usual level of demand. For example, if they have this history of data, how many referrals or how many patients that they would have annually, so they would divide it into how many clinicians and how many sessions that they would have. So they would schedule the appointments based on the history of data. And then the new clients are immediately given the first available appointment at the time of referral for an initial assessment. And during the first appointment, it served a variety of purposes, including an initial assessment of the child's needs, triage for ongoing service delivery, and the initiation of early advice, which includes education and also referral to other services or treatment. And if the child was identified to require to have more than one health discipline service, so the first appointment would be booked with the professional appropriate for the most pressing need identified, with subsequent interdisciplinary referrals made as required. So, Prof. Cho and Dr. Aida, Which of the part of this step would you think differs from what we have currently in Malaysia?
I'm trying to understand. I mean, the first step is that it's good they based on the past numbers of referral. Is that if I sit in FMC, so meaning to say we have like say 104 referral a year. So meaning to say every week there will be a two,
Mm.
isn't it? Two new referral. So and then based on the numbers of doctors who are able to access, so they will see how many can be seen a week. Is
Mm.
that so?
Mm. Yes.
Yeah. So here is a assessment appointment, meaning it's not the actual consultation yet. It's just assessing the appointment,
Mm.
right? Only then they were given the first available appointment uh, after the initial assessment. Is that what it means? So meaning to say, let's say at the referrals to FMC, then this under this step model, the patient would be given a session with the doctors, uh, as many as they can, as they have pre-decided. They have look at the numbers and potentially the numbers, the slot to be given on any of the week, and the patient will come in with a referral letter or whatever, and it's not a consultation. It's just a
Screening, like
assessment.
screening assessment.
It's just assessment of the appointment. Yeah. So, but they say the first appointment, this appointment would actually include multiple purposes now, which are good actually. It's something like the Sedang Hospital also, isn't it? Sedang Hospital, we got a letter to them. You have to bring the letter there. Sometimes it's the triage counter or the nurses at the counter who did the assessment. Or sometimes they don't understand or is it too complicated. I think they bring it into the doctors and then appointment will be given. But I think often the patient will actually send home and to wait for a call, a phone call, for the appointment date. And sometimes they waited for months before they even get a
Mm.
call about the appointment date. Some even complain they never get a call. Yeah. So if I understood it, then this is the step model lah. Let's say Hospital Sedang is running a step model. We got a referral to Hospital Sedang. So it's still not clear whether they go there. I mean, they will call to go there, or they just bring the letter straight away there. And if it's still within the quota of the weeks, then they'll be seen. If it's not, they'll send home and then call back for the initial assessment appointment or what. It's not so clear, isn't it, in the paper?
Mm. Yes. Yes.
Right. But compared to before, I think is Idalina back here? Compared to before, I mean the appointment, we don't know the appointment is how is it done. It seems like the waiting time is a few months, isn't it, before they get to see the doctors. Under this step model, so they get the assessment appointment so called, and this has been given some protected slot, numbers of protected slot per week, uh, per the numbers of physicians around. So this improve the waiting time so called.
Which
So is
means,
this,
yeah,
yeah,
which means during the assessment they got to see the doctors during the assessment appointment.
yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
So this has improved their waiting list because of this.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm. So in terms of the process of the implementation of the intervention, so because this is actually a training model, so it serves as a hub and spoke training model in which that the research team serve as a hub. They led a 2 hour synchronous online workshops over a 6 month of period in 2020. So there were five healthcare centers involved in the training model. So 2 to 4 champions nominated by their center attended the workshop. So at least one frontline manager or team leader and key clinician or intake workers were involved in the training. And there were five process involved in the implementation, which first is to address supply and demand needs analysis. Second is to calculate the new appointments needed. Third is to reduce the backlog. Four, preservation of assessment appointments. And five, the modification of treatment pathways. So we will see later on what are the roles of the center to follow this five-step process. On top of that, the five participating services each receive a small grant up to 10,000 Australian dollars provided by the regional health authority to support strategies to reduce the backlog of patients on the waiting list. So to access this funding, each site was actually required to prepare a backlog reduction plan outlining how the funds would be used to reduce the backlog, and there would be no additional funds would be given to those participating centers.
Mm.
And then in terms of the workshop during the training, the workshop included opportunities for sharing progress, encouraging accountability, and providing a chance to acknowledge and celebrate achievements. And there were also discussions on challenges and barriers. The supportive, interactive environment facilitated by the research team, and participants were also encouraged to communicate outside of the workshop sessions and share resources, allowing an informal community of practice to develop over the course of the project.
Mm.
So this is actually the figure of the work and hub training in which that the research team serve as the evidence translation hub, and these are all the participating community health centers. And along this model, there are also peer support, accountability, sharing ideas, confidence, and success recognition across the workshop. So this is on the table. State this step implementation process. So the first step is the gather data, in which each site required to gather clean and accurate data on supply and demands for the service. And then they would calculate the number of new assessment appointments that are required each week to keep up with the flow of referrals into the service. So in terms of the service provided by research team, they would be group workshop involving representative of all sites facilitated by the research team to analyze this service demand data. And then in terms of reducing the backlog, the action required at each site include the targeted intervention to address the existing backlog of waiting clients. So for example, they have to conduct an audit of existing wait lists or temporary increase in resource or use of BITS clinic for rapid assessment of client needs. So I'm not sure what does it mean by BITS clinics here because it's not elaborated in the paper, but I think it's something to do with their clinical practice here for the rapid assessment of client needs. And then in terms of the support provided by research team, the group workshop will involve representative by the research team, facilitated by the research team in which that they have been provided the 10,000 Australian dollars to actually support the backlog reduction strategies intervention. And then after that, they would have to create new appointments in which they would set up clinician schedule with protected appointments specifically for all new clients, matching the number required to meet the demand as that have been analyzed in step number one, and also to establish new workflow in which the centers have to analyze the client journey to reduce or remove unnecessary steps. So they have to establish new process that enable clients to be directly booked with new appointments with minimal process prior to the first appointment. And they also have to work with other clinicians to rethink that the concept of triage so that all children get equal access to an initial assessment, but ongoing use of clinic resources are also prioritized to those with a greatest need. So in this step, um, the group workshop, the each site have to present their workflow to the research team, and they would discuss and also address the issues that arise during this step. And lastly is to embed the change in practice in which that they have to review their progress, establish process for ongoing monitoring, troubleshoot and problem solving, and also to continue improvement in the models of care and refining care of pathways. And also in terms of the support provided, each participating site has to present the group on their progress, and also there would be a discussion and also problem solving discussion on this when they are implementing the changes in practice.
Mm. Which part of it do you think is the most challenging part? No, from my perspective
Mm,
uh is a trust in the evidence translation hub, right? It's a
yes.
trust in this group of researcher who is trying to teach me what to do for my clinic, that kind of thing. There must be of some group of people of high credibility, so that the other five community health site and they can trust in them and to implement the changes. That's one thing I think is of great challenge.
Mm.
The second one would be embedding the changes in practice. Is I think this is what it means by preservation of the
The
new model.
intervention, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
But I think on the step number three, right, Rob, the reduced backlog, because they don't really in the results section also they don't really mention on how they would actually utilize the 10,000 AUD to reduce the backlog of existing patients. So actually, I would love to know how actually to reduce the backlog of patients.
How up to your imagination, huh?
Mm.
That's the catch. I thought that's the one. That's the incentive. I think
Mm.
one incentive to get people to change or to get into this implementation project, lah. Which is nice. Which is nice.
Okay, so we move on to the outcome measures. So there would be two outcome measures in this study. First is from the perspective of client or patient outcome, and second is the employee outcome. So in terms of the client outcomes, first they want to see the changes, the primary changes in waiting time across the three time periods. So for children who had been referred to more than one discipline, so this outcome was actually recorded as the time elapsed between the date of their referral and also the first appointment provided to the patients. And then the secondary outcomes would be the proportion of children. First is the proportion of children discharged within 3 months after their first appointment, in which it can be the marker of change in clinical decisions about ongoing clinical care. And the second is the proportion of appointments not attended by referred children. And the
Mm.
waiting list at each center was taken at three time points immediately prior to the implementation, after the backlog reduction stage, and also 12 months after the implementation. And other than that, the demographic data of the children, including the age, gender, and discipline referred to, were also collected in this study.
Mm.
In terms of the employee outcomes, so they actually also conducted the online survey to the employee. So first is the satisfaction measured before and 6 months after the implementation. So they use the 20 item satisfaction of healthcare employees questionnaire. So in these tools, they actually asked about the satisfaction related to the job content and also to the relationship with the managers or with the co-workers in relation with the implementation of the new model. And the details of the tools is actually item 1 until 18 is the agreement with statement about their workplace, in which they have to answer in a four-point Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree to strongly agree. And item 19 would address the likelihood of recommending their workplace to others on a 4-point scale. And the last item, where the respondents have to rate their workplace on a scale of 1 to 10. And next is the post-intervention online survey. So they also been asked on top of the SHCE questionnaire, they also been asked on an open response questions about perception of the implementation of the model at their healthcare service, and they would be asked about the benefit and drawbacks of the models and their experience of the implementation process. And the last question would ask whether they would recommend the model to others, and they have to answer whether it is yes, no, or unsure. So this is the employee outcomes for this survey. And in terms of the statistical analysis, so first, in terms of the waiting time, so data were put across the centers and compared across the three time periods using a Kruskal-Wallis test. So it is actually a non-parametric method because the distribution was positively skewed as in typical waiting time data. And then chi-square statistics were used for comparison of nominal variables, and PET-T tests were conducted comparing changes in waiting time from time point 1 to 2 and from time point 1 to time point 3. So this is actually used because to provide an estimate of the size of any effect while acknowledging a lack of power as a potential limitation. But I think, Prof, in my opinion, they can actually use the repeated measure ANOVA.
Mm.
What do you think? Instead of using the PET test differently for each time point.
Yeah. True.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because later on when they are discussing about their sample size, they are quite confident that their study is enough of power. So I think ANOVA is the
It's just that because mixed model or in repeated measures, they just have five. They just have five center, five
Mm,
cluster.
mm,
If I know correctly, any mixed model that I think they would want to have at least 10 for it to be
oh,
robust.
oh,
So if they have just five, that's why they are worried
mm,
of the limit of the possibly or lack of power. But I think the level of data is actually from patient, isn't it?
yes.
Of if but if they use a mixed model on that, then the cluster will be five, and then the patient level, I think they have more than enough lah at the patient level.
Mm,
Then I think they say it's anonymized. In one of the sentence, they say it's anonymized, so they can't tell whether this patient is from which center.
mm,
Then, because they were saying they pull all together in the 3 periods of the waiting time, so they can't tell, or they purposely don't want to pinpoint uh, which center. Uh, Perhaps it's not acceptable to show whether they improve or not. Yeah, we may disagree. Otherwise, you will not know which health center will be performing better or not, isn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
For the secondary outcomes, for the employee outcomes, so in terms of the employee satisfaction, so the SHCE survey was calculated by taking the average of scoring from item 1 to 18 and converted it to a score of 100, and higher score will indicate greater satisfaction. And because they have the pre and post survey, so the differences in SHCE scores between the pre and post survey were analyzed using the Mann-Whitney U test. And for the responses with missing items, the denominator was adjusted using conversion to reflect the number of items answered in chi-square were used for the comparison of nominal variables. And in terms of the comment for the from the text response items in the follow-up survey, it was actually coded line by line and sorted into teams using an inductive approach by a single reviewer.
You see the second one, the second rows, they account for dependent in the follow-up survey. So they conducted a sensitivity analysis of a random sample of 20 participants. I don't know why they don't use the PET kind of equivalent or the
Mm,
non-parametric test. Instead, they kind of draw 20 random samples from baseline, from follow-up.
yeah.
Of course, they then adjust it for multiple comparison.
Mm,
Um, it's kind of bit why this is the best statistical strategy. They did not actually explain, isn't it?
no.
Mm. They did say something like PET T test early on, isn't it? But for
Yes.
this, I don't know why they use a Man-Whitney. It's a non-parametric. I think there's a PET kind of equivalent PET T test in the non-parametric. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's one called Wilcoxon test.
Mm,
Yeah, I don't know why they don't use that. But anyway, you can see the analysis are actually relatively straightforward and simple,
mm.
isn't it?
Because mostly it would involve the pack comparison and also the post hoc analysis to see the differences between the centers or time points.
And assuming, they're assuming also throughout that 2 years or
Mm,
3 years,
mm,
that was one of the period during the implementation or even the post interventions were in the were in the COVID pandemic, isn't it? So I
yes.
think they're making assumptions. The impact was the same before, during, and after.
Mm,
Whether this is fair, I think we have to be careful and judge lah.
mm,
Because there's no control group. So
mm,
they're assuming the pre-intervention, during intervention, and post-interventions, the impact of COVID or pandemic was negligible in terms of in terms of giving, in terms of the stat models in handling the waiting times. So I hope they discuss about that as well. Or it could be underestimated, or the waiting time could be better without COVID. Then it's actually giving much more credibility lah. The effect could be higher.
Mm.
But all that we cannot we won't know, because it actually crosses during that unusual period of time.
Yes.
That's the without a control group, so we can't actually really say the interventions, the effect is solely because of intervention. Could it be because of something else?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So in terms of the sample size calculation, so it was anticipated that the participating services would receive an average of 20 referrals per month. So data would therefore be available from a pool sample of approximately 900 children in each time period, making the study well powered to detect a clinically significant changes in waiting time. So they don't really calculate the sample size, but they actually based on the data that they have in terms of the number of referrals.
They should actually provide all the alpha and beta values.
Yeah, I
Mm,
agree.
yeah.
Or maybe because this is an implementation study, Prof. Do we really need sample size?
No, I think in order to be enough powered for the to detect the clinically significant changes in waiting time, they still have to have certain minimum sample size,
Mm,
and that's why these sample size calculations would be relevant, but it's not provided here lah, because
mm,
there's a change in waiting time before, during, after. So in order not to commit the alpha error or beta error of saying these changes in waiting time is not happening by chance. So you need to have certain numbers, minimum numbers of sample size. If it's not significant, then you are also confident that it's truly not significant, and in the result observed changes in waiting time is not happening by chance. That kind of thing.
mm,
So this kind of paragraph isn't sufficient without providing how they did it, the alpha and beta values, they position it, and based on what uh, they concluded that 900 in each time period is sufficient for them to detect the clinical
mm,
changes in waiting time. So it's bit insufficient.
mm,
Though the numbers seems to be, I agree with the numbers,
mm,
is quite large amount, but how good is that? They have to be provide all the values.
mm. So we move on to the result section. So before we move to the result section, any questions from the audience on the method of the study? Okay, so if there is no questions, then we will look at the results. So the data, the total number of children included in the study is 2,564 children. So from this data, so we can see that there are significant differences in terms of the gender of the children referred, in which majority were male, and then there were no significant difference in terms of the age at referrals, which is the average years referred is around 3.2 years. But then in terms of the first discipline seen is actually significant different, in which majority of the children referred were seen by speech pathology. Okay, and then this is on the supplementation table. The post hoc test using the pairwise comparison and Bonferroni adjustment indicated that the post-intervention cohort had a smaller proportion of children seen first by a speech pathology and a larger proportion by a physiotherapist. And then fewer children had an initial visit by a psychologist in the implementation period. And the use of dietitians for the first visit increased in the implementation and post-implementation periods compared with the pre-implementation. Okay, so in terms of the outcomes of the waiting times, you can see that the waiting times across all centers reduced by 33% from a median of 57 for children referred to the service in the pre-intervention period compared with 34 days for those referred during the implementation period and 38 days for those referred post-intervention. And the pairwise comparison with conformity adjustment indicated that there was a reduction in waiting time from pre-intervention to both the implementation and also the post-intervention periods. But then there was no change seen between the implementation and post-implementation. So when they are comparing with the baseline or the pre-intervention, they were both significantly different in terms of
Mm.
reduction of the waiting time in days.
Are you impressed by this result?
Mm, I think yes.
Yes, isn't it? It's
Yeah, yes.
like improve like almost like hundred
One,
percent, isn't
yeah.
it?
I think from 2 months to 1 month.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah,
Fantastic, you know.
waiting time. Okay. So in terms of center specific, all centers observed some reduction in waiting time from the pre-intervention to the post-intervention periods, but there was variation between sites. In which that if you can see the graph on the left side, the side two, which is the orange line here, did not observe significant reduction in waiting time, but then there were also reduction, but it's not significant, which is from 54 days to 46 days post-intervention. But overall, it is significantly reduced in terms of the waiting time. Okay, so the third outcome, which is the number of children on the waiting list. So in July 2020, which is the baseline immediately prior to the beginning of the implementation period, there were 335 children wait for the first appointment across the five participating services, which an average of 67 per service. And then during the implementation, which is in March 2021, the backlog reduction had fallen to 112. And in July 2022, which is the 2 years after the commencement of the implementation, two of the services were continuing to operate with no waiting list, and three were observing some recurrence. And the total number of children waiting remained 42% lower than the baseline measure, which is significant different compared with
Mm.
the baseline number. In terms of the discharge practice and missed appointments, however, in this study we can see that the proportion of children discharged within the 3 months of their first assessment reduced from the 22% to 14% from pre to post intervention periods, because initially they were actually expected that the discharge number would increase, but in this study it would reduce, in which they would describe or they would discuss in the discussion section later on why they assume that the discharge is reduced, because they are expected that the discharge would be increased post intervention.
Mm.
Okay. So this is the employee satisfaction outcome. There were no significant difference between the characteristic of pre and post intervention respondent. Just want to highlight that only 32 employee participated in pre intervention and 27 participated in the post intervention online survey. And when they were asked to rate the statement whether they would recommend the health facility to other workers as a good place to work, so there was no significant difference between those who answered affirmatively, which is definitely yes or probably yes, during the pre-intervention period compared with the post-intervention. And there was also no significant difference in the mean rating when respondents were asked to rate their workplace out of 10 as a place to work, in which pre-intervention was 7.8, but post-intervention was 7.1, which is reduced, but it
Mm.
is not significant. Okay. This is on the open questionnaire. So of the 27 respondents to the post-intervention survey, 16, which is more than half, said that they would recommend the STAT model to others. 33% were unsure and the rest would not recommend it, which is around 8%. And some of the comments that they get from the survey was in terms of the benefit of the STAT model, in which families are able to get quicker access to information from a health professional, and those who get a very good team leader commented that their team leader is a very supportive of change and has great advice on managing caseloads. But then because this intervention was implemented during COVID-19, so clinicians were only able to offer telehealth appointments, which may not be suitable for some clients. So there were also backlog of clients needing to wait until face-to-face services were able to resume. So these are some of the comments during the implementation of the intervention because of the COVID-19. So in terms of the discussion, first is the implementation and impact of STAT model in pediatric community health setting. So health professionals trained in STAT through participation in a series of group online workshops can implement the model in pediatric community health settings to actually reduce waiting time, in which has been proven significant in the study. Although there is no significant impact on failure to attend rates or employee satisfaction, the implementation of STAT perceived as positive for clients and also the center, despite there are also some staff challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And reduced waiting time also improve outcome for various developmental conditions, which then would ultimately influence social engagement, academic learning, functional development, and well-being of children. But this were not investigated in the study. And in terms of the project impact and consideration for future implementation, the discharge practice and missed appointments, as we can see that the post implementation, there were lower proportion of children being discharged within 3 months. So this could be due to the COVID-19 distraction, in which the clinicians may affect their discharge decision. So they could not really discharge their patient because they could not really do the face-to-face assessment other than the telehealth assessment. And then in terms of the effectiveness and scalability, this is the first study to test the impact of training healthcare employees in a practical low-cost model, and this study will also potentially to be replicated at a scale, offering an evidence hub for evidence translation, in which that their evidence can be translated and also replicated at a bigger scale or at different setting. And in terms of the reducing waiting list, this is actually an integral component of the STAT model, and we can see that there were an immediate reduction in waiting list post implementation of the intervention, and the use of small grant or fundings for the activities to address the bottlenecks and also the backlog also support the implementation of the intervention in this study. And for the challenges and future consideration, this project was actually initiated during the COVID-19. So there were some data impacting data and study activities with lockdowns and also health system stress. And despite those challenges, we can also see that this study have proven that waiting times and lists reduce, suggesting greater potential in a stable environment using the same intervention model. And attention to change management, communication, and peer support is also important for maintaining employee satisfaction during the implementation, because it needs um, the work or the participation of everyone in the healthcare centers. In terms of the study limitations, so this study is actually a non-randomized intervention study with a historical control, in which that, as Prof. Chu has mentioned, there would actually be potential risk of bias, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there would also be some data limitations in terms of lack of demographic data, in terms of the ethnicity or socioeconomic status for the referred children, and they were also incomplete data on waiting time by discipline regardless of the first discipline seen. So another additional consideration for this study, that this study did not enable pairing of employee responses, in which that we could not know whether the same employee responds to the pre and post online questionnaire, and the view of parents and caregivers were also not included in the evaluation. So before we move on to the conclusion, any comments from you, Prof?
I think they made very fair points about limitations. Yeah. So one thing is that very unsure how this model will perform uh, out of COVID situations.
Mm.
So it could be much better,
Yeah.
or it could be the other way around as well. So a bit unfortunate. The study was, met the COVID when they were conducted. But I mean, from the logic points of view, it may should work, isn't it? It's just a matter of how much.
Yes.
But I think this study also have a very good education point if you want to implement anything. So you want to have a credible so-called hub, that kind of thing. The group of so-called researcher or scientists or expert who are there to continuously providing the support over like at least 6 months, up to 6 months,
Mm.
and then we can see that change may happen in on the ground.
But I think one of the points that they did not discuss is actually who actually involved in the training hub. They did mention about the research team members, but they did not really specify who actually in the training hub. Whether there were
Yeah.
clinicians, yeah, whether there were clinicians as well or administrators.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, the other one I think is the same in all this implementation and hybrid trial like we learned before in the previous MJH, is that the team that they call out for training from the health, from the side that is going to implement anything, are actually key persons. The key
Mm.
clinicians, the manager, and those are the people who kind of responsible for their health centers. Then only your implementation could be actually done. So must call up the so-called the stakeholders from the site.
Mm. So as for the conclusion, a hub and spoke approach to evidence translation can lead to a successful implementation of the STAT model in pediatric community health services. As we can see that in this study, waiting times was reduced and employee satisfaction remained stable. And the STAT model approach provides the promise of a practical, low-cost approach that can help service providers to ensure timely access for all patients. And because we don't really have appraisal tool for implementation trials, so I am actually using this recruit screening tool to actually appraise this paper. So in the first component, which is in the relevance component, the scientific relevance, which is indicating this with an acceptable literature or citing systematic reviews. So it's a yes because these models has actually been proven in other setting, in which in control trial and also in adult setting. And in terms of societal relevance, the area research of involvement of end user, in which yes, they actually included the key person of managing their health centers, in which involve the administrators as well as the clinicians, and the research team or expert, which is led by expert in the relevant field or conducted with relevant expert, is a yes, in which that those research team also led the training hub. And then in
Mm.
terms of the credibility, the first data collection design appropriate for the research question, because this is actually an implementation trial. So I think it's credible in terms of, although that it is an implementation study, they also have this ethical approval for patients' right. And then in terms of the important samples, representative of generalizability to an important or relevant population, I think it's a yes, although that it is a non-randomized trial in which that they don't have a control group. And for internal validity, they are using the validated instrument and also measurement process by trained or blinded assessors. And in terms of the precision, appropriate sample size estimation and achievement, I think it's a no, because I think they should actually mention on the sample size calculation or selection.
Mm.
And for the usefulness of the study, they report important outcomes, in which the waiting times and also the waiting list and the employee satisfaction. And in terms of meaningful estimate, they actually considered statistical proper statistical test and also analysis. And lastly, the conclusion was also based on the results, in which that they don't really overclaim their findings, and they also mentioned about the limitation of the study that could be improved.
Mm. Nice.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's all for
Yeah.
today. Yeah. Any additional comment, Prof?
One point I think about external validity. Not so
Mm.
sure that 5 centers, whether they could be the so-called typical healthcare centers
Oh
in,
yes.
in that
Mm.
region.
Mm.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think those of centers, if is known to the peoples or to you, then perhaps you can also adopt the step models, and you may actually then achieve something similar outcomes lah. Yeah, so unless until we know what kind of health centers the administrative, the organizations, their surrounding, their workload, I think we will not be able to tell well for sure whether the result could be applied. But implementation trial on its own, it has to be done, and then only they can tell. But of course, if the center is very similar to mine, then I can say, no, my center should be able to perform as well.
Mm.
Mm.
Alright. So I think that's all for our MGH for this year. So we will let you know on our next date and also topic for our next MGH. So before we end, I would like to post the attendance link in which that you can fill up.
Is there any burning questions from the floor?
So the attendance form is already in the chat box, so you can fill up the attendance form for e-certificate.
Mm.
So any other questions before we end the session? If there is no more questions, then I would like to thank Prof. Chu and also everyone for attending our MJH today. So thank you and see you again. Thank you, Prof.